So we are now in Italy. We're going to be watching Epic History's History of the Mediterranean Superpower, The Rise and Fall of Venice. And yeah, this is something Venice we learned a little bit about during the Italian Wars. I got recommended this video, so I'm going to be watching it now and seeing just what's up with Venice. I don't really have much else to say other than let's get to it, shall we?
The extraordinary city of Venice, Queen of the Adriatic. Behind the elegant facade of its famous domes and canals lies the dramatic history of a 1,000-year empire, a maritime republic, and formidable naval power. But this great city had unlikely origins. At the height of the Roman Empire, these coastal lagoons were home only to small fishing communities.
I am really admiring the real footage he used, in that it does look very beautiful. You know, a lot of Italy does look really beautiful. And yeah, it's just like, I really enjoyed it. Like, definitely a place that I would like to visit, you know, someday.
But in the 5th century AD, the Western Roman Empire was overrun by barbarian tribes. As Italy became a battleground for Huns, Goths, Eastern Romans and Lombards, many sought refuge among the lagoons. In 726, these refugees elected Orso to be their duke or doge, the first in an unbroken line of 117 doges who'd rule Venice for 1,000 years. For nearly 200 years, much of Italy was ruled by a resurgent Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. Its Italian province, known as the Exarchate of Ravenna, fell to the Lombards in 751. Only Venice held out, protected by its lagoons. Answering the Pope's call for aid, Charlemagne and the Franks came to Italy and crushed the Lombards, but they also failed to take Venice. Charlemagne's son, Pepin, King of Italy, was said to have died from a fever caught in the marshes that surrounded Venice as he tried to attack the city. In the following decades, Venice asserted its independence from the Byzantine Empire, and thanks to its location, flourished as a trading hub between Europe and the East.
That is very interesting. In terms of just, it seems to have a natural defense to it that has allowed it to, you know, essentially ward off invasion from the Lombards and from the Frankish kingdoms. So, and also its position seems to be great in terms of just trade and its interconnectability with the rest of the world. So, already such a small little area in the grand scheme of things, but yet you can see what advantages it has going for it. Wow.
Venetian merchants sold Italian grain and wine to the great city of Constantinople, where they bought spices and silk to sell to Western Europe. Above all, Venice's early success came from the trade of salt, the vital food preservative of the medieval world, harvested from salt pans and lagoons. The Venetians went so far as to describe salt as il vero fondamento del nostro Stato, the true foundation of our state. In 828, 2 Venetian merchants visiting Alexandria smuggled the supposed body of St. Mark back to Venice to boost the standing of their home city. The saint's relics were interred in the city's great new church, the Basilica di San Marco. The first basilica.
Wow, such a beautiful sight. And also just the prestige, right, of having a somewhat holy relics. So we're no stranger to holy relics in Catholicism. And, you know, like remnants of the cross, etc. But man, just this architecture is just beautiful to behold, right?
Was destroyed by fire in 976. Today's cathedral, consecrated in 1094, stands on the same site. St. Mark became the city's patron saint. His emblem, the winged lion, became the symbol of the Republic and decorated its standard. Venetian trade routes to the east were plagued by pirates from the Balkan and North African coasts. So Venice built a navy to drive them from the seas and garrisoned strategic harbours and islands along the Adriatic shore. By the year 1000, Doges of Venice were also styling themselves Dukes of Dalmatia.
My name is Matthew Murdoch.
Yeah, piracy in the Adriatic is no... We've heard about this even up to, like, back then in the Roman Republic. You know, the Adriatic is a very overlooked area, I find, in history, but in terms of just how no one really talks much about that aspect. But yeah, it seems like Venice would have to rely completely on navy since, you know, obviously trade is their bread and butter, but also, yeah, it would need to be a complete, like, almost naval tying force, right?
The distinctive Venetian warship was the galley, powered by up to 150 oars and triangular lateen sails, rigged fore and aft. Weapons included a battering ram and around 30 crossbowmen. Galleys were also used to transport high-value cargo, such as spices, silks, or precious stones. In 1103, construction began of Venice's famous Arsenale, a giant state-owned shipyard that would become one of Europe's largest industrial centres, employing around 2,000 workmen and turning out hundreds of ships a year. The Arsenale pioneered many modern industrial techniques and underpinned Venetian naval power for centuries. Armed with a powerful navy and lucrative trading concessions from the Byzantine Emperor, Venice rose to become the greatest commercial and naval power in the Eastern Mediterranean. But Venetian power also came through shrewd negotiation and self-interest. This was the age of the Crusades, and Venice was closely involved with Crusader states as allies and trading partners. In 1202, the Fourth Crusade arrived in Venice, seeking ships to take them to Egypt, but with no money to pay for them. Doge Enrico Dandolo sensed an opportunity. In exchange for loans, he first persuaded the Crusaders to capture Zadar for Venice. Then, relations having soured between Venice and the Byzantines, to attack...
Yeah, this led to, I believe this was the Fourth Crusade, where essentially, obviously the goal was to get Jerusalem, but they didn't do that. Instead, this whole Venice venture and them being broke, and finding other ways to appease Venice, it led to Constantinople, the Crusaders attacking it, essentially almost killing the Romans until the Romans had a resurgence. Insane, by the way, that all happened. They didn't even get to friggin' Jerusalem.
Attack Constantinople itself. In 1204, the world's greatest Christian city was sacked and plundered by self-proclaimed warriors of Christ. Venice took its share of the loot, including most famously 4 bronze horses from the Hippodrome of Constantine, which found a new home on the facade of St. Mark's Basilica in the center of Venice.
Yeah, it's really cool just how many of these remnants from the past you can just kind of that are still around and that you can just like see. You know, there's just something really cool about that, like, you know, relics of history. It's like a gateway into a much earlier time of, you know, human history, which is just really cool, you know?
Doge Enrico and the Crusaders carved up the Byzantine Empire between them. Venice got the islands of the Aegean, Crete and the strategically placed ports of Modone and Korone, known henceforth as the Eyes of the Republic. Empire brought Venice unprecedented wealth and power, but fueled a bitter rivalry with another Italian maritime republic, Genoa. For more than a century, these two Italian city-states vied for supremacy in the eastern Mediterranean, their wars ranging from the Levant to Sicily, the Aegean, Black Sea, and Adriatic. During these wars, a Venetian captain named Marco Polo was taken prisoner and used his time in a Genoese jail to dictate an account of his travels in China. The rivalry became a regional conflict, Genoa making alliances with the Habsburg Duke of Austria, the King of Hungary, and Padua, Venice with the revived Byzantine Empire, Cyprus, and Milan. The fortunes of war ebbed and flowed until in 1379, Venice came under attack from land and sea, with a Genoese force occupying Chioggia, just 15 miles south of the city. But Venice miraculously turned the tables, using galleys armed with gunpowder artillery for the first time to trap and capture the Genoese fleet.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. And I actually have heard about Genoa and frickin' Venice. Like, it's coming back to me that I've heard about the conflict and the two kind of being mentioned in the same line. Man, Venice, man, this is really interesting to me.
The wars finally ended in 1381 with the Peace of Turin. Venice had to make significant concessions, and like Genoa, had been exhausted by war. But while Genoa soon fell victim to internal feuding, Venice would stage an astonishing recovery, thanks in large part to the unique system of government by which the Republic was now ruled. The most miraculous city of Venice, rich in gold but richer in fame, strong in power but stronger in virtue, built on both solid marble and the harmony of its citizens. Petrarch. While Western Europe was dominated by kings who claimed to rule by divine right, several Italian city-states harked back to classical forms of government, chiefly the idea of the Republic, res publica, the thing of the people. However, at the height of its power, Venice's Republic, La Serenissima as it was known, was firmly in the hands of its nobility. Only those whose names were listed in the Golden Book, the city's registry of nobility, could join the Great Council, which appointed all senior officials through a complex system of voting and drawing lots. They chose 40 of their members to form the Quarantia, who supervised economic affairs, and 200 to 300 to form the Senate, the main legislative body, attended in addition by the Republic's admirals, generals, and diplomats. The elected head of government remained the Doge. His powers had been steadily diminished, until by the 1400s, he was no more, Venetians joked, than a tavern sign, a decorative symbol of power, though he continued to wield huge influence. The Republic's day-to-day government was the Signoria, made up of the Doge, the 6 members of his minor council, and 3 representatives of the Quarantia. They could be joined by 3 boards of special advisors, known as the Savi, or wise men, to form the full college. The Council of 10, meanwhile, had a special remit to sniff out subversion. It was a system that eventually acquired so many checks and balances that change, for good or ill, seemed both unimaginable and undesirable.
What a unique system. Again, like using, in an era of like kings and absolute monarchs, you know, that Venice here would be so unique in terms of like utilizing its republic And just like this entire thing, like the checks and balances, the different positions, that is just so unique and like really cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like I said, like I'm not gonna pretend that I'm like an expert in Venice, because I'm not. I'm very ignorant, but again, just... Sorry, I'm just looking at all this. Wow.
It's 9:15.
The Constitution of Venice, an insuperable monument of wisdom and efficiency. Gasparo Contarini. Over time, an idea developed across Europe that Venice's constitution contained the three classical forms of government: democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy, in perfect balance, and so ensured social harmony and stability. The myth of Venice, as this became known, overlooked the Republic's healthy tradition of attempted coups, rampant corruption, and social tension. But the Venetians did achieve something rare in the medieval and Renaissance world: a durable, stable, and effective government. The Serene Republic had one further strikingly modern feature: the best diplomats in Europe, skilled ambassadors in every capital and court, sending information back to Venice in secret code from across the continent.
Wow. Everyone's freaking, like, you know, reaching out to Venice. And again, when he mentioned with the different forms of, you know, monarchy, democracy, oligarchy, all being implemented and creating a somewhat... I think effective seems to be the most optimal word in terms of describing this. Like I said, to me it seems like complex but effective. Their positioning already, with their geographical positioning, their unique but effective government, their power in terms of their naval power, in terms of trade and battle prowess. Like, Venice has a lot going for it, you know? Just overall a very... And also their influence and everyone reaching out to them and noticing them, like... And also their use of diplomacy and... Wow, they're just like a complete, like, package in a sense, right? They're so... On paper, they look so, like, tiny compared to everyone else, but in practice, so effective and efficient.
Venice would need every advantage, for the years ahead would be dominated by bitter wars with her Italian neighbours and new challenges to her empire. You Venetians are very wrong to disturb the peace of other states, rather than to rest content with the most splendid state of Italy, which you already possess. If you knew how you are universally hated, your hair would stand on end. You are alone, with all the world against you. Galeazzo Sforza.
Holy crap, Galeazzo, chill. Yeah, as we covered in the Italian Wars, Italy was fractured. It wasn't a united thing, and it was essentially a battleground between various, not only Italian states, but outside states. Like, frickin' France was a huge part of the Italian Wars, and all these areas like Naples, the Papal States, just one giant constant battle royale, right? Italy wasn't united, and Venice had to be kind of a part of that, and they were threatened for a while there too, I believe, if I remember correctly from those videos from Kings and Generals. Like, you know, so, yeah, just insane.
For centuries, Venice had stood apart from the territorial wars of her Italian neighbours, focusing instead on her maritime empire. But the war with Genoa, and particularly the Genoese occupation of Chioggia, had shown the Venetians that their city was vulnerable. In 1404, she was attacked again by former allies, the Carrara family of Padua. But the Republic assembled a large army from across her empire and was victorious, annexing Padua and conquering Verona. More gains followed in Friuli. Doge Francesco Foscari, whose 34-year reign was the longest of any doge, was determined that Venice must continue to expand her territory in Italy for her own security. He used the Republic's enormous wealth to hire bands of mercenaries, led by captains known in Italy as condottieri. Their name came from the Italian word condotta, or contract, and they had been an important feature of Italian warfare since the 1300s. Initially, these mercenary bands were led by and made up of foreigners: Catalans, Germans, Hungarians, even Englishmen. But by the 1400s, Italian condottieri were leading these armies, waging wars on behalf of competing states, and sometimes even conquering Italian states for themselves. Condottieri would often switch their allegiance to the highest bidder. Their soldiers were equally disloyal and notoriously unruly. Since they fought for nothing but personal gain, and often switched sides, they had no interest in slaughter, and so their battles were often theatrical and virtually bloodless affairs.
Freaking mercenaries, man. That's the thing. Yeah, with mercenary bands, like, at the end, they're only in it for the gain, right? It's like they're fighting for money, so it's like, unlike a patriotic person who's fighting for their country and willing to die for it, like, guys fighting for money, it's like, even then, like, do I want to die? And it's like, hey, if we're losing, why not jump to the winning side? That's why it's like, there's always kind of that edge with mercenary bands and groups, like, and they also become quite a problem if they're not paid. They just go around and do whatever the heck they want. We see that quite a bit. Especially like with like Michael the Brave, when we watched that earlier in the year. Just like, if, hey, we're not getting paid, we're just gonna go do what we want, take what we want. So it's like, I can understand the thing. It's like, if you can't raise a home army, you know, you're gonna need mercenaries. But it's like, man, I would try to avoid them if I could. But again, like I said, like, sometimes you just can't raise an army. You need men, and like mercenaries are there. Obviously, they've endured throughout human history and still do to this day, right? So you just gotta have to put up with it. But man,
ambitions of the Venetian Doge and his condottieri put Venice on a collision course with the leading power in northern Italy, the Duchy of Milan. A long war began between the two states and their allies, with the Venetians winning a great victory at Merclodio. In the treaty that followed, Venice gained yet more territory, pushing west past Bergamo to the River Adda. But war soon broke out again. For nearly 3 decades, northern Italy was ravaged by bands of mercenaries. Their leaders were immortalized by the great artists of the day, men such as Francesco Sforza and Bartolomeo Colleoni. Finally, by the Peace of Lodi, Venice secured her Domini di Terraferma, her mainland state, to go with her Stato da Mar, her overseas empire. 40 years of relative peace followed. Shattered in 1494, when the King of France, Charles VIII, invaded Italy.
Yeah, like I said, we covered kings and generals telling of the Italian wars, and I was always surprised by how prevalent the French were. I thought, originally when I heard that, I was like, oh, it's just we're going to be covering everything going on in Italy, but no, we saw just how Italy was kind of this chessboard for all these other powers, like the Habsburgs, the Austrians, the Holy Roman Empire, frickin' France, just, you know. I'm pretty sure it was Venice, right? That where the Pope declared we need to destroy them, and everyone jumped Venice, but then it immediately turned to everyone jumping someone else. Just like the Italian Wars was such a funny series because of just how it was hard to follow because everything was flipping all the time. Alliances, people would jump one group and then immediately jump each other. It's like, it was just a complete cluster mess. And the Pope just running around leading armies himself. Like, freaking Italy was insane. Like, I kind of always felt bad for the French because they were putting up with something so unorthodox with the rest of Western Europe, you know? Why is the Pope, like, fighting me? You know? Man, I'm pretty sure it was Venice, right? Where the Pope was like, we need to eradicate them off the face of the earth. Like, straight up, it was insane.
With a large army. His goal? To enforce his hereditary claim to the Kingdom of Naples. But his actions united even bitter enemies like Milan and Venice against him. The Italian states formed the League of Venice, led by the Borgia Pope Alexander VI, and fought King Charles at Fornovo, but could not prevent his escape back to France. It was the beginning of a long conflict, known simply as the Italian Wars, which saw northern Italy become the primary battleground in the bitter contest between the kings of France and the Habsburg emperors. It was fought against the backdrop of the Italian Renaissance and Protestant Reformation, a complex and sprawling conflict that would last 6 decades. The early display of Italian unity was short-lived. Venice soon switched sides, allying with the King of France against Milan in order to share in the spoils of her defeat. Venetian ambition was now regarded as a major threat by her Italian neighbours. Of these, none was more ruthless than the Pope. Pope Julius II, the man who commissioned Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel and created the Pope's famous Swiss Guard, was determined to crush Venetian power.
Yeah, this dude was old, but he was a warrior Pope. Like a tough, frightening old man. Like, you know. And yeah, he was so proactive in terms of the fighting, uniting everyone against someone else. Just like, I was like, holy crap, like, you know, like, chill, Pope, like, you know.
Venice, he declared, would be returned to the status of a fishing village. Pope Julius issued a papal decree excommunicating the entire Venetian Republic, a bold move that effectively declared open season on the Venetian state, its assets, and citizens.
Insane. Frickin' like, you know, you've heard of people being excommunicated, but the guy went further. He was like, I'm gonna excommunicate an entire republic. Everyone in it is gone. Like, you know, you're out. Julius wasn't messing around. The dude's funny, but like, at the time, very frightening, obviously, you know? Like, looking nowadays, it's like, holy crap, dude, chill. Like, you know?
He also assembled a formidable alliance against Venice, the League of Cambrai, the mightiest ever faced by a single Italian state. Venice faced an existential threat. In 1509, at the Battle of Agnadello, her forces suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the French king.
Booking.com has all kinds of stays.
One contemporary, the Florentine diplomat Niccolò Machiavelli, wrote that Venice had lost in one day what it had taken her 800 years to conquer. However, the Italian wars were notorious not just for their many atrocities, but their shifting alliances, twists and turns. Within a year, the Pope had switched sides, forming an alliance with Venice to fight the French. Then Venice switched sides, siding with France against the Pope, and helping to win a crushing victory over the Pope.
Again, it just keeps spinning. Like, so we're watching that series, like, it's hard to follow because of just the mess that the Italian Wars was. I'm just surprised even people who were in it freaking knew what was going on. Like, imagine the common soldier, you're just fighting one day with these guys and then the next you're fighting against them. You don't know what the fudge is going on. You're just like, I guess we're just fighting now. Like, you know, like at the time, I'm like, how did they even keep track of all this stuff, you know?
Swiss mercenaries at Marignano. Just 8 years after Venice faced destruction by the League of Cambrai, the Treaty of Noyon restored nearly all her former territories. The Republic had run the gauntlet of foreign powers and formidable alliances. But through sharp diplomacy, political flexibility, and a little good fortune, she had survived. It is the most triumphant city that I have ever seen. Philippe de Comines. Despite the long years of war, the Venetian Republic was a driving force of the Italian Renaissance, and the 15th and 16th centuries were its golden age. Venice was home to great Renaissance painters, such as Giovanni and Gentile Bellini, Vittorio Carpaccio, Titian, and Tintoretto. Architects like Palladio, and scholars like Francesco Barbaro. He was one of the new humanists who devoted their lives to the rediscovery, study, and sharing of texts from ancient Greece and Rome. Venice became a beacon for the greatest European minds of the age.
The Renaissance is just a cool period in terms of just the birth of art and, like, you know, literature and just everything going on. It's amazing. And just admiring all this art is just really cool, you know, because just a birth of human creativity still talked about to this day, you know? And sort of a reconnecting to the past, like you mentioned with the ancient Rome and Greece. Kind of like this cool reconnecting of the past. So again, it was just a beautiful, beautiful time, you know?
Visitors included the great Dutch philosopher Erasmus of Rotterdam, and the Italian astronomer Galileo, who demonstrated his telescope for the Doge.
Galileo! You know, from Queen. But yeah, like, some of these names are very, very much familiar with me. And yeah, just a very great cultural move, you know, in the world.
But Venetians had a reputation as doers rather than thinkers. Their city was renowned as a centre of craftsmanship, producing Europe's finest glassware, as well as silks, cottons, and wood carvings. Nowhere were the city's mercantile and scholarly traditions more brilliantly combined than in the world of printing. Doge Cristoforo Moro issued the city's first printing license in 1469. 30 years later, Venice was producing more books than Florence, Milan, Rome, and Naples combined.
Wow.
Venice was where Aldus Manutius invented the paperback and set out to publish every surviving great work from classical Greece. By the end of the 15th century, Venice was the printing capital of the world. Such industry, against a backdrop of a city often described as the most beautiful in the world. The Venetians combined Renaissance architectural ideals with their city's unique lagoon setting and created a masterpiece. The famous...
Definitely, it's like the city itself is art, you know what I mean? Like, these paintings, the architecture, it's like they turned their own city into a piece of art, which is just beautiful to behold, you know?
Grand Canal, the Rialto Bridge, and the Bridge of Sighs, where prisoners got their last glimpse of the beauty of Venice before descending into its cells.
That's kind of nice. Here, have this really beautiful sight, you know, before you rot forever in darkness.
And all along the Grand Canal, the palaces of the city's great merchant families. Because for all its grandeur, business here was never less than cutthroat. Venetian...
Yeah, the business world, we all know, can be really cutthroat. Also, this drip is amazing. Heck, I'd wear this now. Are you kidding me? Like, look at this guy. He's literally flexing on these guys. He's like, look at that smug look. Like, yeah, look, behold my drip, my beauty, you know. He's rocking the colors, by the way. I'm sorry. Let's get back to this.
Merchants were the most treacherous, lying, thieving scoundrels such as I never believed existed on Earth. According to one visitor, the German printmaker Albrecht Dürer. Do not awake our terrible sword, for we shall wage most cruel war against you everywhere. Neither put your trust in your treasure, for we shall cause it suddenly to run from you like a torrent. Beware, therefore, lest you arouse our wrath. Ottoman Sultan Selim II to the Signoria of Venice. While Venetian culture flourished...
I completely forgot, yeah, this isn't just... I completely forgot that the title of this video is The Rise and Fall of Venice. Like, I was, like, so used to just... Yeah, we're gonna be shifting into actually how they decline soon, and I forgot all about that. I was like, this is a really nice, wholesome video, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. We have to watch them fall now. Oh, no one stays on top forever. Unfortunately, that's just how history works.
Across the seas, her empire faced a new and terrible threat. In 1453, the Byzantine Empire, which Venice had helped to weaken 2 centuries before, fell to the Ottoman Turks. Initially, the relationship between Venice and the Ottomans was businesslike. Venetian merchants were allowed to remain in Constantinople, with the same trading privileges they'd always had under the Byzantine Empire. But there could be no illusions about the Turks' next target. Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror had the Venetian Empire firmly in his sights. The onslaught was not long in coming. Argos and Negroponte fell first, as Venice struggled to defend her empire against Ottoman military might. This conflict would last, on and off, for more than 2 centuries. The Venetian fleet, once so dominant, was overwhelmed by Ottoman naval forces, led by skilled admirals such as Hayreddin Barbarossa. By 1500, even the twin eyes of the Republic, Modone and Corone, had been put out. Successive doges could only watch on, powerless, as the Venetian power base in the east crumbled. In 1570, the Ottomans came for Cyprus. The garrison of Famagusta only surrendered after an 11-month siege. In violation of the terms of surrender, the Venetian commander, Marcantonio Bragadin, was flayed alive. After a century of Venetian defeats, efforts to form a Christian alliance against the Ottomans finally paid off, and the Holy League, led by Venice and Spain, sent a powerful fleet east. They met the Ottomans in the greatest galley battle in history, at Lepanto. The Venetians, fired on by their desire to avenge Bragadin's terrible death, led the Christian fleet to a stunning victory. But for all its fame, Lepanto did little to shift the balance of power in the Mediterranean. The Ottoman onslaught had been merely blunted, not defeated. The dominion of Crete is Italy's outer defence, the gate whereby the insidious force of the Turk may penetrate, to the great hurt of the major part of Europe. Venetian ambassador Giovanni Sagredo to Oliver Cromwell. A period of peace followed, but Venice was now a fading power. The Republic's prestige had always been linked to her dominance of the seas, but this was in steep decline. Crucially, she'd fallen behind in shipbuilding technology. While Venice clung on to her old galleys, Portuguese and Spanish captains sailed their caravels and carracks out into the Atlantic, pioneering new sea routes west to America and east to India and East Asia. For centuries, the wealth of Venice had relied on eastern trade via the Byzantine and then Ottoman empires. Now, she had been cut out. And while Venice fought costly wars in Italy and the Mediterranean, the city was repeatedly ravaged by plague. The Black Death of 1348 was the first, but outbreaks in 1575 and 1629 were almost as lethal, each killing about a third of the city's population. The government did what it could.
It's kind of funny how the fall of the Byzantines kind of led to the rise of the, Ottomans moving ever westward, and just how the the Crusaders and Western Europe essentially kind of created their own nightmare with that, right? Because, it almost came across like the Rome/Byzantines were, kind of a checking for what was coming eastward, but their fall led to so much. So kind of Venice's part in weakening, Rome with attacking Byzantium kind of had this long repercussion, I feel, towards them at the end. And obviously the world's ever evolving, ships, everything's improving, and falling behind when your entire thing is naval power ain't good. Being kicked out by the Ottomans from going east, you can just see that. Also, just the plagues. Oh, the plagues are awful.
To prevent the spread of infection, residents were ordered to stay home, though an exception was made for the funeral of the city's most famous artist, Titian. New arrivals had to isolate themselves aboard ship for 40 days. The quarantena. That's the origin of quarantine. Wow. With Venice weakened by war and plague, the Ottomans sensed an easy victory. In 1645, they attacked Venice's last major overseas possession, Crete. The Republic rallied. Funds were raised from the nobility, and appeals went out to the crowned heads of Europe to fight once more for Christendom. But this time, Venice would stand alone. Most of Crete was quickly overrun. But under the leadership of Francesco Morosini, said to always enter battle with his cat by his side, the port of Candia mounted a heroic resistance that was to last 21 years.
Holy crap. Dude, cat guy ain't messing around. Oh, that's kind of cute, but I worry about the animal. You know? Hopefully they left the cat alone. If anything happens, just leave the... Well, could a cat even live 21 years? Like, I don't think so. So, hopefully it met a natural end. Sorry, I'm a big animal lover, you know? Yeah.
One of the longest sieges in history. Simultaneously, an epic struggle raged across the Aegean Sea. Venetians and Ottomans now almost equal in naval power. Ultimately, the Venetians on their own could not save Crete. In 1669, with many thousands dead and the city in ruins, Candia surrendered to the Ottomans. After 465 years of Venetian rule, Crete had finally fallen. 15 years later, Venice and Doge Morosini had their chance for revenge. In 1683, the Ottomans were defeated at the gates of Vienna, and Venice joined the grand counter-offensive, known as the Great Turkish War. Morosini led an expedition that recaptured Lefkada and the Greek Peloponnese, then known as the Morea. But during the Venetian siege of Athens, one of their shells hit the Parthenon, where the Ottomans were storing ammunition. The resulting explosion tore through the 2,000-year-old temple, smashing columns and collapsing the roof. Venice's restored empire in Greece did not last long. By 1714, the Ottomans had recovered sufficiently to launch a swift campaign that reconquered the Morea. This, the seventh war between Venice and the Ottoman Empire, would prove the last. The reason was simple. Venice was no longer a Mediterranean power. She is reduced to a passive existence. She has no more wars to sustain, peaces to conclude, or desires to express. A mere spectator of events, in her determination to take no part in events, she pretends to take no interest in them. Count Paul Daru. The 18th century saw Venice continue to shine as a cultural beacon. A city that dazzled visitors with its canals, churches, opera, and art.
Yeah, but its heyday as one of the great powers in the world is gone now, huh? Man, but they sure went out swinging. GG, man. Because the Ottomans, they were no joke. They were wild. And we will be covering about the Ottomans' expansion in the future by kings and generals, because there's a lot to that.
Bereft of empire, Venice crystallized into a state of glorious, luxurious stagnation, rigidly conservative, incapable of reform. Industry, commerce, and military power were neglected. So when the French Revolutionary Wars turned northern Italy into a battleground once more, Venice was ripe for picking. In 1796, a young French general named Napoleon Bonaparte.
Friggin' Napoleon. Oh man. So, yeah, I think, if I remember correctly, yeah, Napoleon was known for looting. I'm pretty sure he did that after the first coalition war, where he just looted parts of Italy and took them back to France. So, yeah, that's the thing.
Backed by a powerful army, demanded the Republic's surrender. There was nothing the Doge and Great Council could do but accept his terms. The French, assisted by Italian revolutionaries, tore down symbols of the Ancien Régime and La Serenissima's proud history as an independent republic. The horses of St. Mark were among hundreds of artworks crated up and sent to Paris. At the Feast of Liberty,
Boney the Ogre. Freaking British, man. I do kind of miss. I feel like all last year, 2024, we just covered so much freaking Napoleon from all kinds of videos that I do kind of miss the guy. And I also miss the freaking British propaganda because it was hilarious. Just always drawing him like this.
the insignia and robes of the last Doge and the famous Golden Book were brought to the Piazza San Marco and burned.
Oh snap.
1,000 years of Venetian independence was at an end. Venice was awarded to Austria in 1797, later incorporated into Napoleon's Kingdom of Italy, and then after his defeat returned to Austria as part of the Kingdom of Lombardy-Venetia. But Venetian patriotism had not been completely snuffed out. In 1848, inspired by revolutions across Europe, its citizens rose up against the Austrians, declaring the formation of the Republic of San Marco. Austria gradually regained control of its Italian territories, but Venice, aided by its old ally the sea, held out longest. The Austrians even tried floating balloons carrying bombs into the city, the world's first aerial bombardment, though results were disappointing. After a 17-month siege, Venice surrendered and returned to Austrian control. But the 1848 revolutions had stoked the flames of Italian nationalism and desire for unification. The dreams of the Risorgimento were realized in the 1860s, and Venice became part of a new national state, the Kingdom of Italy. Though its empire is long gone, the splendor of Venice endures. It has remained a magnet for artists and poets, its light and lagoon fascinating painters like Turner and Monet. Its romantic waterways seducing writers from Lord Byron to Ernest Hemingway. Now, La Serenissima faces the challenges of mass tourism and rising seas. Venetians are fighting back where they can, successfully pressuring authorities to reroute the largest cruise ships and limit the size of tourist groups. But Venice now finds itself on the front line of the global climate crisis.
Man, its old ally the sea has now turned against it. Top 10 anime betrayals of all time, and now they have to war. The Great Tourist War is upon us, guys. Who knew that tourist would be the next enemy of Venice? I'm joking around with this, but like, you know, it is true. These are issues. And, yeah.
There are fears that it could be engulfed by the sea before the end of the century.
It's not a day.
This extraordinary city, the center of a powerful maritime empire that lasted more than 1,000 years, has more battles to come. If you can't wait for your next fix of epic history...
Yeah, that seems to be it. So, this was another great video from Epic History. It was so cool learning about just the great history of this place. And hopefully it doesn't get drowned, like, you know, by the sea, actually. That would be a great loss, I think. You know, but... oh well, we'll see where we are in 100 years. So... yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everyone.